Happy Valentine's Day. It's that time of year. The players we love for the 2025 season. Let's reveal those up next on a Kokomo Friday.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manaea, bounce back for Aaron Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Mosu, Carlo, and Fado. Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank loves him some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
Happy Kokomo Friday and welcome in to Fantasy Baseball today on Valentine's Day, February 14th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Love is in the air, but you know what else is in the air? Baseball, pitchers and catchers, spring training. It's a fantastic time of year. You gotta love it. Players, today on the show, it's the players we love for this upcoming season, a hitter and a pitcher for each of us. Maybe Scott will have the wandering eye. You'll have to wait and see. Plus, a lot of news from the week. Nick Pivetta to the Padres, Kenley Jansen to the Angels. We did an emergency podcast breaking down Alex Bregman to the Red Sox yesterday, but there has been a lot going on and a lot to talk about. Let's jump right in. Chris, you will kick us off with a hitter you love this season.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm going first because I have no interest in following whatever Scott's got cooked up. It's always a whole thing, and I'm just not going to put that much work into it. So my player that I love is a player we've talked a ton about this offseason, and I think we all love him, Jordan Westburg. There's a menage a quad here with Jordan Westburg. We all love him. And just the reasons we love him are fairly straightforward, right? He hits the ball really hard. He's a premium athlete. He was already a very good fantasy option last season, and the breakout was kind of derailed by that hand injury at the end of the season. It also, maybe took him a little while to really establish himself. But man, Jordan Westburg, everything looks about 90% as good as Gunnar Henderson. The plate discipline's a little worse. The quality of contact's a little worse. The athleticism a little less impressive, but it's a really broad, well-rounded skill set. And obviously Gunnar Henderson is a first rounder. I don't think Jordan Westburg has that kind of upside, but if we were talking about Jordan Westburg this time next year as a second or third rounder in fantasy, coming off a 30 homer, 20 steal season where he hits 270, that really wouldn't surprise me very much.
Yeah, so beforehand, we all text out our picks to each other, and you did break my heart a little bit, Chris, when you stole Jordan Westburg from me, but you're right. He is the player we all love.
That's the dark side of Valentine's Day, Frank.
You got it. We operate on a dibs system, and you got to call dibs,
If you pace out Jordan Westburg's numbers over 150 games, 25 homers, 88 RBI, both of which would have ranked second among second base eligible players. And you didn't even mention the fences moving in, right?
Mm-hmm.
The left field fences in Camden Yards, 13 feet closer to the foul pole and 26 feet closer to left center for a right-handed hitter who delivers premium exit velocities. It's not hard to imagine him cruising right past those 25 home runs. Yeah, big into Jordan West. We're all crushing on Jordan Westburg this year.
And Scott mentioned second base eligibility. He has second and third base. I've noticed some of the mock drafts that I've done is when I get to the point of drafting Jordan Westburg, sometimes I don't have second or third filled. And it kind of allows you some in-draft flexibility. You take him, and then later on in the draft, whoever you think is a better value, a second baseman or third baseman, you can take that player and just kind of switch Jordan Westburg to the other position. So it does allow you a little bit of flexibility within the draft as well. The ADP for Westburg on Fantasy Pros is 92.5. I'll just read off some other hitters going just ahead of him, not necessarily same position. Jordan Westburg or Seiya Suzuki, just in a vacuum.
Westburg for me.
I'd have to consult my rankings. I'm going to say just off the cuff, Westburg.
What about Westburg or Luis Robert?
Ooh, I do have Luis Robert a few spots ahead. You talk about Westburg potentially having 30-20 upside. Well, Luis Robert did that 2 years ago. So we know that Luis Robert, he nearly went 40-20. So I'll go with the guy who's done it before.
Realistically, like Westburg could steal a lot of bases. He's fast enough. He hasn't shown the inclination to do that. So I'm not even really counting that. It could happen, but I'm not really counting that in my, when I'm dreaming up Westburg's numbers. Robert, I have ahead, but I'm more likely to draft Westburg.
Just a few others here. Westburg or Alex Bregman, who will wind up having the same position eligibility, second or third in Boston now.
I've got Westburg ahead.
I have Bregman ahead.
What about Westburg or Junior Caminero? Lots of excitement.
Westburg.
I have Westburg ahead, yeah.
And last one, Westburg or Mark Vientos?
Westburg.
Westburg.
Yep, it's going to be Westburg for me as well. A clean sweep. All right, Scott. The floor is yours. The hitter you love this season.
Guy I've always had my eye on. I heard it as soon as I saw his luscious hair cascading down his shoulders like a whisper into my soul. Bo. Bo. My Bo. And mine alone. There was a time when the cameras couldn't get enough of him. He was a cover model, a sensation, a first rounder, a third rounder, a game changer. Suddenly cast aside because of a .225 batting average. Left for dead at pick 125. But I still see it. Every time I close my eyes, I see it. He batted no less than .290 in any of his first 5 seasons, and he's still batting 1,000 with me. So why the .225 batting average? Only Bo knows for sure. They say Bichette happens, but not like in my dreams. They say his calves hurt. Oh, I bet they did. And like my former flame Clarissa, I think that explains it all. People say he's past his prime at 27, but they don't know how far I'd go for my Bo. They don't know. Oh? What's this? The helmet's off, but no cascading hair. A boy's cut Bo? Oh no. And with that, my eye wanders to the other side of the field, where I spot the new kid in town. I remember how he got there, how a club spurned by an ex-lover, needing some quick action at the hot corner, received that one fateful call that made it all right again. Ring, 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 ring. Hello, Houston? We have a problem. Oh, Chicago. We have a solution. The trade was consummated and all was made right in the world. As I reflect on those events, it suddenly occurs to me, why reread the book of Bo Bichette when you can have Isak, the Ewok? I'm talking Paredes, or I should say Paredes, because that's what I intend to throw for him once he's mine. His StatCast makes him out to be a cold fish with blue in every critical category, so that when I make my move in round 15, he won't know what hit him, but I'll know what he hit. A fly ball to the leftist part of left field, because that's what he always hits. And in Houston, that's pay dirt. Ever hear of the Crawford boxes? Oh, he'll be finding those again and again and again. And just a little bit to their left, only 315 feet away from home plate, there's a pole of some utility or another. I imagine him living there, just working it over with such regularity that the Astros won't even remember old what's-his-name, Alex? This pole you may know as a foul pole, but I like to call it a fair pole, because all is fair in love and WAR war, both of which figure to rise in Houston, where there are no problems, only solutions, and Ewoks, like Isak.
Fantastic.
Now you see why I didn't want to go second.
Chris, you made a fantastic
Yeah, I don't want to have to follow that up.
Great job, Scott. I mean,
Very
I
good.
hope Bichette takes care of those calves because can't have that being a problem again this season. It sounds like it's all good to go, but as long as I got this straight, Scott, Bichette is the player you love. The wandering eye, of course, is for Isak Paredes.
Is for Isak Paredes, yes. So these are two players that yes, I'm my heart aches when I miss out on them on draft day. The value for Bichette is just too good to believe. But the utility of Isak Paredes at his price may be even higher. I find I'm more likely to leave third base open for Paredes than I am to leave shortstop open for Bichette.
Yeah. And at shortstop, Bichette's ADP 127.5, which is, again, much different than where it's been in years past, where Bichette was a top 40 pick this time last year. Obviously, coming off a terrible season, there's nothing we can point to statistically last year. But Scott, you obviously referenced a lot of the numbers from previous years. Good batting average. I think we'd expect, modest power, maybe a little bit of speed. Entering a contract year in the prime of his career. I know that he's dealt with the calf stuff, but we have seen other hitters randomly run in their career years, Willie Adames and Aaron Judge. So that is a possibility here. I mentioned the ADP. You guys are much willing to take him much higher, right? Top 100 pick on Bichette.
Oh yeah.
Yes. In fact, I initially had him like 65th or something. I sobered up when I saw how late I could get him, but even now, gosh, I have him 71.
Yeah, I have 73, so I'm fully willing to take him. Yeah.
All right, so you guys would clearly take him over Matt McLain, right?
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, McLean's ADP is 104.5, so almost 2 rounds higher than Bichette right now. I mean, the next one up is Willie Adames. His ADP, I think we've all kind of agreed, is higher than we'd be willing to pay. We all have him as a bust this season. 66.3 is the ADP. I mean,
I have Bichette ahead of Adames. Yeah.
Yeah, I have Adames ahead of Bichette.
Sounds like you don't love Bichette.
No, I do.
Empty words.
See, my parents are pushing Adames on me, but my heart is really with Bichette. So I've struggled with that one because it feels wrong to rank Adames behind Bichette, but I don't actually want to draft Adames.
Here's my thing. It feels wrong to rank Adames behind Bichette. Except for except for every year prior to this one.
Yeah.
When it hasn't even been close between the two of them.
And as hopefully didn't get lost in the flowery language.
Flowery, that's one word for it.
I think Bichette's just going to bounce all the way back. He was hurting all of last year, and it was so out of character, and he's still only 27, and I don't have any reason to believe it was just one of those weird seasons that happens to players sometimes.
Yeah. I brought this up before. I will just play devil's advocate on Bichette. I don't believe this to be true, but it feels like there are a lot of detractors for Bichette this season. His right leg has suffered a lot of injuries. He's dealt with the calf multiple times. He's had issues with his right knee. He's had issues with the right quad. So there is a chance that his right leg is just not 100%. Like maybe there's been too much damage done and he's just not the same player physically as he once was. And if that's the case, then, maybe he lets us down. I don't believe that.
It's possible.
Seem to believe that.
It's possible, but we generally don't assume players are just finished at 26 years old because of calf injuries, right? Like that's not really the way we tend to think about aging curves for players. And just to put a fine point on it, the closest that Willie Adames and Bichette's prices have ever been before this season is 80 spots in ADP, according to NFBC historical ADP. Last year, 2023, Bichette was the 13th player, 13.95, and Willie Adames was 93.75. So just 1 year is enough to completely flip-flop that to what's Adames going, like 60 picks ahead of Bichette on average? Yeah.
Yep. Not in my drafts.
Yeah, that one just it feels like a just obvious overcorrection. And I'm happy to take any kind of discount on Bichette. Anything after the top 80, I think is a is a nice discount. I think in the most recent mock draft we did, the 15-teamer, he was a 6th round pick, so he was like 82 probably. That's perfectly fine.
And I made this point before, but the counter to those saying, "Oh, maybe his legs have just gone bad," is that he's in the final year of his contract, and the Blue Jays did not entertain. I mean, I guess there were some conflicting reports this offseason, but they came out early in the offseason and said, we have no interest in trading Bo Bichette. And we never heard rumblings of any offer that came close to satisfying them. So if they really thought he was damaged goods, they would have pushed for that harder for sure.
All right, let's take a quick break. Just a programming update. We will not be live on YouTube this Sunday night, but we will have our SP Preview Part 2 that will publish on Monday morning, both on YouTube and in your audio feed. Thanks to everybody who is watching this video. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We'll take a quick break. We'll break down Isaac Paredes a little bit more right after this.
We dig it. Do you? The Pro Volleyball Federation on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there. The players we love for the 2025 season. We left off with Scott's amazing poem / monologue / revelation of love. And Isaac Paredes was one of those players. Dream landing spot, winding up in Houston, 2 years removed from hitting 31 home runs. Last year, down season, obviously Chicago was just a terrible fit for Isaac Paredes' swing. And now winds up in probably the best landing spot possible in Houston. The ADP is 195.8. I believe we all rank Paredes inside of our top 150. And Scott, I'm with you. I mean, in drafts that we do, hopefully we're both not waiting to fall back on Paredes. But if I miss out on the third round guys like Riley and Machado or Jordan Westburg in the middle rounds, I have no problem just waiting and hoping to get Isaac Paredes as my starting third baseman.
Yeah, I actually took him in our recent our recent 15-team Roto mock, where my overall goal was to play it safe. I would to take fewer risks than I've taken in such a deep league in the past, and yet I took Isaac Paredes to be my third baseman and my lawfully wedded wife at pick 138, and that's because he was my best third baseman on the board still, and I didn't want to get left out at that position. And I think he'll live up to it. Like I said, I think he's going to make those Astros fans forget about Alex, because I think the numbers he's going to put up with the way his swing is perfectly tailored for that ballpark are going to be comparable to what Astros fans got used to seeing from Bregman in more recent years.
And to make the point, according to the expected home runs by park on StatCast, Houston's the best park for him. He would have had 79 career home runs. That's the highest of any park in baseball. That's tied with Cincinnati. It's ahead of the White Sox. It's ahead of Tampa Bay, where he had that 31 homer season. He would have had 26 homers last season. If he played his full season in Tampa, he would have had 21 last year. If he played his full season in Chicago with the Cubs, he would have had 13. So yeah, it's a perfect landing spot for Paredes. He's got great plate discipline. He makes a ton of contact. He makes not a lot of loud contact, but a lot of ideal contact. His launch angle sweet spot is very high. So he's got a consistent launch angle. He's able to do what he does or what he wants to do very consistently. So I think he is someone who is, I think a 30 homer season, a 250-ish batting average is well within the realm of possibility for Isaac Paredes, where
he's done it before. He did it in Tampa, which was as shallow at the corner, 315 around that pole. But obviously it doesn't remain as shallow going across left field as Houston does with those Crawford boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mentioned the ADP is 195.8 for Paredes, which is just still way too late. Some names going just ahead of him. Would you rather have Paredes or Luis Rengifo?
Paredes.
What about Paredes or Max Muncy?
Paredes. Oh
Even in a points league?
easily.
Even
Even in a points league.
Mm-hmm.
Because Muncy, I don't think is a full timer anymore.
What about Paredes or Alec Bohm?
Paredes.
Paredes or Eugenio Suarez?
Paredes.
Chris?
Paredes. I did think about taking Suarez as my player I love, but I didn't want to make Scott mad. This is supposed to be a day of love. We don't need Scott's 2 minutes of hate for Eugenio Suarez.
You would have had frank and jealous rage over Jordan Westburg, and me in disgust over Eugenio Suarez.
What about Paredes versus Matt Chapman?
I believe I did move Paredes ahead of Chapman. I know I was the highest on Chapman of the three of us, and I'm fine with him as my starter, but I think of him more as the backup plan to Paredes than the other way around. You know what? I do have Paredes ahead of Chapman.
It's tough for me
That's a
because
75 pick difference of ADP, by the way.
I think the difference in their skill sets is like they're probably both going to hit 240 to 250. They're probably going to get close to 30 home runs, but probably not much more than that. It just comes down to how real was Chapman's 15 steals last year. Because Paredes is basically a zero. Paredes is basically a zero in that category. And Chapman, if he can be a legitimate base stealer, and he's always had the athleticism for it, he just never ran before last year. It's a contract year guy who ran a bunch more last year. I just don't know what to make of that. And so I will give Chapman the edge, but I think the non-stolen base production should be very similar for the two of them. And if Chapman doesn't run, then it's basically a coin flip.
I expect, apart from stolen bases, I expect Paredes to outperform Chapman in the other four categories. Maybe not by much, but I would take Paredes over Chapman in those other four categories.
And in a head-to-head points league, I think it's probably pretty clearly Chapman or Paredes.
Yeah. As for how I'm going to approach it, I'll keep Paredes behind Chapman in my rankings, but how I'll treat it is when Chapman goes off the board,
that's when
I'm going to be quickly ready to take Paredes. And if it just so happens that Paredes goes before Chapman, okay, I'll know to snatch up Chapman right away. He's my fallback option, even though he's going earlier.
Last two names, Paredes or Jake Berger?
Paredes.
I think I have Paredes ahead.
Okay. And lastly, Paredes or the man who left, Alex Bregman.
Bregman.
Yeah. Although
original Coke.
This one might really come down to what your team needs at that point, because I do think Paredes is going to be a better power hitter and potentially a much better power hitter. I think Bregman might have 30 points of batting average on him.
Yeah. I mean, going to Fenway, we talked about this last night, Chris. We could maybe get like a 270, 280 batting average out of Bregman with that green monster in left field. All right, let's move on to the hitter that I love this season. And if it's not going to be Jordan Westburg, someone else I love is Willson Contreras. Big news this offseason that Willson Contreras will play first base. He still has catcher eligibility. That makes him a cheat code for fantasy this season because he's going to get everyday at bats, and that's going to give him an advantage at the position because there's not many players who play every day. I mean, there's Salvador Perez. There's going to be William Contreras up top.
Adley
Rutschman. Cal Raleigh plays a lot too, but there's really only a handful of guys that play almost every day at the catcher position. And as long as he's healthy, I think Willson Contreras is going to be one of those players. He still is a great hitter when he's been on the field. Last year, 262 batting average, 15 home runs, 4 steals, and 848 OPS. That's really strong at the position. Projections on Fangraphs have him for between 125 and 140 games. If he gets that much playing time, we're probably looking at 25-ish home runs, 6 to 8 steals, really good counting stats with a batting average that doesn't really hurt or help you in that 260 range. Still crushes the ball. He's not perfect.
Honestly, for a catcher, 260 is downright helpful.
Yeah. I was going to bring up, look, he's 33 years old. There's some underlying plate discipline stuff. Swinging strike rate was really high last year. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, definitely like some lower leg stuff. And I'm not really sure that gets better as you age, But my hope is that moving over to first base, not having to crouch all the time, can help him stay healthy. It's not a guarantee, but my hope is that it helps. Are you guys in on Willson Contreras this year?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
about him. I actually thought about just doing a Willson Contreras, Ivan Herrera duo as my players I love, because I really think just combining the two of them is one of the best moves you can make in a 2-catcher league, especially. I think in the 15-teamer we just did, I took Ivan Herrera, but not Willson Contreras. But I think I took William Contreras in that one. So that's even better, actually. But yeah, I love both of them. I think they're both great. Look, I think this is the thing. At his age and given his injury history, you should not just expect Willson Contreras to get 650 plate appearances and play 162 games, right? Like, he has a long injury track record, and it's not just, okay, he's not catching now, he'll stay healthy. You can get hurt playing first base. You can get hurt running the bases. But what I don't expect to happen this year is the fractured left forearm that cost him a month and a half last year.
Yeah.
Like the other injuries, I think the right finger fracture at the end of the season was a hit by pitch, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yep.
That can happen. What isn't going to happen is him trying to frame a pitch and getting hit with a backswing and breaking his arm. So that's the stuff that I think is less likely to happen. He can still get hurt running the bases or whatever, but I think the injury, the performance, the playing time baseline is now higher for Willson Contreras.
The ADP for Willson Contreras, 02.5. Would you guys rather have him or Will Smith?
Contreras.
Would you rather have him or Cal Raleigh?
I would rather have. I think
Waiting
I
for the
have
page
Cal
to
Raleigh
load.
higher.
Yes.
But as a first baseman, Willson Contreras has more upside. As a first baseman, Willson Contreras, if he's able to get around 150 games, he could be the top catcher in fantasy. It's not outside the realm of possibility.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with myself. Willson Contreras. I have him ranked higher than Cal Raleigh. He's my number 5 catcher.
Yep, same. I have him ahead of Cal Raleigh. I think Contreras versus Salvador Perez is a little bit closer at this stage in their career. It's probably not even fair to say, but I think Contreras might have a little bit more upside if he could stay healthy. But Salvi plays so many games, and he's been so reliable, and he's been pretty durable in his career as well. So I don't really want to bet against Salvi. I think I'll probably draw the line there. But Willson Contreras is going almost 20 picks behind Cal Raleigh in ADP. So you could wait a little bit there just outside the top 100 and grab Willson Contreras. All right, let's move on to some news of the week. And we'll hit this, and then we'll come back to pitchers we love a little bit later on. There's a lot of news going on, obviously. Pitchers and catchers, people showing up to spring training. We're learning about injuries we didn't know that happened. We're getting signings that are happening as well. Scott, I didn't know if just up top you want to share a quick thought on Bregman to the Red Sox and Christian Campbell seemingly losing out on an early season opportunity.
Yeah, so Jeff Passan came out late last night and said the plan was to play him at second base. Obviously, these are all messages communicated through the back channels since the deal isn't official yet. But I'm seeing today from Red Sox beat writers that there's still speculation Devers could be impacted by this signing. And, you know, the safer thing for the Red Sox to say right away is second base, because saying third base for Bregman raises a bunch more questions. I think it's kind of late for trades. People are already reporting for spring training, but we saw a couple of major late trades last spring, and I think something could happen here still that makes Bregman a third baseman. So I wouldn't count out Christian Campbell yet, and I wouldn't count on Bregman being a second baseman just yet.
All right, we did get a few other signings.
Plus, Christian Campbell is capable of playing like left field. He's capable of playing like all over. So even if he gets blocked out at second base for now, it'll be a race between him and Roman Anthony for who claims the first outfield opening.
I was actually surprised. He played almost as much shortstop as second base last year, even.
Yeah.
And Trevor Story has an extensive injury history.
Yes.
True.
So that's... I think opportunities will be there, whether it's because of trades, whether it's because of attrition. Something will go wrong somewhere. I mean, Rafael Devers had injuries to both shoulders last year. I don't want anything bad to happen to him, but there should be opportunities. It's just probably not opening day.
All right, Bregman wasn't the only big news of the week. We had Nick Pivetta to the Padres on a 4-year, $55 million deal, and Nick Pivetta turned 32 years old today. Happy birthday, Nick Pivetta, if you're listening. Pivetta, we've talked about him for years, man. He has the swing and miss. He has the underlying numbers. It has not translated to sustained success. Chris, do you think this is the time? Finally, Pivetta can maybe figure it out in San Diego.
All right, let's not be dumb. Let's not do that.
This Clark shift.
This is come on, Charlie Brown. You know she's gonna pull the dang football away from you. That being said,
I use the same analogy in the tracker.
That being said, if you view it in the appropriate context, which is not, boy, Nick Pivetta gets a lot of strikeouts, he can be an ace. He's not going to be an ace. If you don't view it that way, I think he can still be an incredibly useful pitcher. And I think this is probably his best chance to actually be a very useful pitcher, because there are two near certainties about Nick Pivetta. He's going to get a lot of strikeouts. I'll say three. There are three near certainties. He's going to get a lot of strikeouts. He's going to give up a lot of home runs. And he's going to have a pretty good whip, probably. The last 2 seasons, 113 and 112. That's actually very useful.
He made huge gains with control last year. And really, it was in the second half of the prior year.
Yeah. And now he's going from playing his entire career in 2 of the better hitters parks in baseball. Philadelphia ranks as the 7th best, Boston the 2nd best in park factor, according to StatCast, to one of the best pitchers parks in baseball in San Diego, and specifically one of the best pitchers parks for home runs. So I do think that there is a chance that if you just draft Nick Pivetta expecting an ERA around 4 and a lot of strikeouts and a pretty good whip, you have a chance to be pretty happy with him in a way that has not been true in the past, because people have talked themselves into Nick Pivetta is going to take a big step forward and be a really impactful pitcher. I don't think that's going to happen. But if you understand what you're getting into, he is a rare later round pitcher who can actually help you in whip. And I'm ranking him now right next to Spencer Arrighetti, 2 very different versions of a similar type of player. I think they're both going to get a lot of strikeouts. Arrighetti, I think, has some ERA upside that Pivetta doesn't. Arrighetti probably going to struggle with whip in a way that Pivetta won't. And so I think you get to the 15th, 16th round in a 12-team league, and you start to look at, hey, I need some strikeouts. I want some upside at starting pitcher. I'm safe in whip. Okay, I'll take Arrighetti. I need some whip help. Okay, I'll take Pivetta. But I think he can be a useful starting option now.
I mean, you pretty much covered it all, but just to underscore,
I was trying to
a couple points here, because I had my initial reaction is, okay, I'm not going to do this again. But then the more I looked into it,
same thing.
The more I looked, I was like, well, it is a pitcher's park for the first time, and now that he's addressed the control issue, the main problem is home runs. So you get him in a good pitcher's park. These are some stats from, I'm getting these from Joseph Camisa on Twitter. It would take me a long time to confirm if they're right, but just eyeballing it, it looks like they're right. So we're going with it. Since 2023, the past 2 seasons, basically, Nick Pivetta ranks 4th in Sierra, 13th in batting average against, 4th in K per 9, 5th in K percentage, 5th in K minus walk rate, and 1st in Stuff Plus. I don't know whose version of Stuff Plus that is. Yeah, I moved him up to about 60th in my starting pitcher rankings, about 20 spots with this news, and I'm kind of excited to draft him again.
Yep.
And guess what? You can draft him. The ADP is 246.8. I have to guess that that's going to rise at least a little bit now going over to San Diego, but some other pitchers in that range, would you rather have Pivetta or Walker Buehler?
Pivetta.
Pivetta.
What about Pivetta or Nick Lodolo?
Pivetta.
I think I have Pivetta higher. Yeah.
What about Pivetta or Jesus Luzardo?
Pivetta.
Wow.
You need to move up Pivetta, Frank.
I probably do.
Here's
I
one that
still like Luzardo. Like I would take Luzardo over him.
I'm looking at my rankings. I only have one Tampa Bay Rays pitcher ahead of Nick Pivetta right now. And it's a guy who, in my SP preview piece, which is coming out probably on Thursday afternoon, but maybe Friday morning on CBSSports.com, the one pitcher I have ranked ahead of him is the guy that I said might be this year's Walker Buehler, and that's Shane McClanahan. So it's not a strongly held opinion there.
Mm-hmm. And with the Padres signing Nick Pivetta, do they trade one of Dylan Cease or Michael King? I think.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what I was hinting at. A little Tristan Casas for Dylan Cease swap. With other parts attached, probably. But
that could make some sense.
That would be interesting, yeah.
We were talking last night, Chris, I think off air, about Cease to the Mets. Like, how would that work? But maybe it's like Acuna and Ronnie Mauricio or something like that, you know?
Yeah, or I think it would be like one of Mauricio or Acuna and Beatty would make sense. But yeah, I think any team with a big payroll and a need at starting pitcher should be very interested in either Michael King or Dylan Cease.
The Orioles, come on.
It's just like, I don't think Heston Kjerstad is enough to get Dylan Cease or Michael King.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Kobe Mayo or Jackson Holiday or Jordan Westburg makes sense. So that's where it's like, it is kind of tough to make a move there, but like maybe Kjerstad and the other outfielder.
They could do like Kjerstad and Dean Kramer, you know, to help fill out the rotation for the Padres. Like,
no,
that.
There's another outfield prospect that they've got.
Dylan Beavers.
No.
Not Enrique Bradfield. They wouldn't.
Yeah, that's the one. Enrique Bradfield.
Kjerstad and Bradfield? I don't think so. That's a
maybe.
lot.
All right.
You'd be wrong. I don't know. I think they like him.
Well, I think the problem with the Orioles is that they are more concerned with winning trades and getting value than maximizing their chances to win in 2025, which might be the right move long term, but you got to try to win the World Series at some point also.
Yep. All right, let's take our final break. When we return, we'll talk about Kenley Jansen to the Angels. We'll do that right after this.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A 16 beats a 1. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Some news and notes. The Angels signed Kenley Jansen to a 1-year, $10 million deal. So much for Ben Joyce, I guess. Jansen still solid last year, 3.35 ERA, 108 whip, 27 saves. He ended the season on the IL with right shoulder inflammation. Scott, where did you move Jansen up to in your relief pitcher rankings?
I moved him up to, I think, a couple spots ahead of where I had Joyce, 21st. So in between Ryan Presley and actually ahead of Alexis Diaz. I think Kenley Jansen, you can pencil him in for 25 saves, and it may be closer to a 30 save pace. If, by saying 25, I'm kind of factoring in an IL stint in there. It's possible he becomes trade bait at the deadline and maybe is moved so that he's not a closer anymore. But I don't know that he's any less secure in that role than like a Ryan Presley or a Carlos Estevez, who I also rank ahead of him, is. So I think he belongs in that range. I am not really shedding tears over Ben Joyce because I'm not sure he was actually the one. I understand he throws very hard, but it wasn't the most functional velocity, meaning he wasn't even a strikeout per inning guy. The ERA, he managed to keep that down where you want it for a closer, but I'm just not sure with increased exposure that he would necessarily hold up in the role. And we have a lot of evidence to suggest Kenley Jansen will. I think if you haven't already drafted yet and taken Ben Joyce, you can consider this move a net positive.
The ADP for Kenley Jansen, 257.8 is the 27th reliever off the board. Have to imagine that's going to move up. Not a substantial amount, but probably closer to 200-ish, I would imagine there for Jansen. Scott, you mentioned some names, but I'll just go around real quick and ask each of you. Would you rather Jansen or Ryan Presley?
Jansen.
I thought I was the low guy on Presley, but I do have Presley ahead.
Yeah, I have Presley just ahead as well. Jansen or David Bednar?
Bednar.
Bednar has a higher ceiling, but I'll take Jansen.
What about Jansen or Carlos Estevez?
That's the other guy I have Jansen ahead of. Yeah.
I have Estevez ahead too, but that Estevez Presley Jansen group is kind of a block to me.
And Kenley Jansen or Jordan Romano?
Romano.
I have Romano at the end of that one, but that's one that like spring training is going to tell me the story there. If he looks good, then we can move him up.
He's better. It's just he's coming off an
Same with
elbow injury plagued year.
Same with David Bednar. It wasn't an elbow injury, it was a lat, oblique, but he was just a disaster all year. So it's like, if those two guys look good, it would be fairly easy to move them up, but I do have Jansen ahead right now.
All right, lots of other news items. I'm going to quickly just run through. If there's anything that you guys want to touch on, just interrupt and we'll talk about it. No surprise, but Clayton Kershaw has agreed to a 1-year deal to return to the Dodgers. He's 37 will be 37 on opening day. He underwent surgery on both his left knee and left toe during the offseason. Velocity was down last year. Results weren't great. I think it's mostly a stay away. Orioles GM Mike Elias said Felix Bautista has a, quote, very good chance of being part of the Orioles opening day roster. Bautista likely won't be cleared to pitch in games until late in spring training. And remember that not only did Bautista have Tommy John surgery in October of 2023, he also had an elbow debridement and an ulnar nerve transposition about a year ago in February of last year. So seems a little bit risky on Bautista.
Felix Bautista has been one of the most mispriced players on NFBC all offseason. Everyone on NFBC is terrified of injury risks, and yet Felix Bautista has been like the number 8 closer and a top 75 pick the entire time. I don't understand the thought process here. I know he was like the best closer in the world for 1 year before he got hurt, but we haven't seen him throw a pitch, and he's had 2 elbow surgeries since the last time he threw a pitch on a mound. So I imagine...
I'll just point out I have him 7th and Frank has him 8th.
I have him 12th. I've been the low guy on him, and everyone's going to come to me. That's how this is going to work. As always, not as always. I'm wrong about things constantly, but I just thought that everybody was treating Felix Bautista as if it was just a certainty that he was back to being that guy. And until we see him on a mound, I don't think you can do that. So no, I have him 12th, and even that, like, the problem is the guys behind him in my rankings are Trevor McGill, who has his own elbow issue at the start of spring training. Alexis Diaz.
Was the elbow confirmed? I saw it was undisclosed.
Okay, sorry. It might have just, I don't know what it was specifically. Alexis Diaz, who I just don't think is very good. Mm-hmm. Ryan Walker, who had like 40 great innings last year, but I have no idea.
Oh, you have Alexis Diaz ahead of Ryan Walker.
Yes.
You have Alexis Diaz way too high. You have him 14th. I have him 22nd.
Maybe I have Alexis Diaz too high. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Felix Bautista, who you have way too high.
I may move him down to 9th.
This around on me.
I said I have him 7th. I'll drop him behind Mason Miller and Ryan Walker, who, by the way, was just confirmed as the Giants closer. Not that I ever had any doubt.
Yeah, I'm going to drop Bautista down to 11. So that would be behind Walker, Andres Munoz, and Yohan Duran. Trevor McGill, we just mentioned, he's been pushed back because he has some minor health issues. It's been undisclosed what exactly he's dealing with, but hopefully we learn more and that he'll be all right. Sticking with closers, Dave Roberts said Sunday that Tanner Scott will see the bulk of the save chances to begin the season, which I think is just interesting wording there. But did you guys move up Tanner Scott at all?
I did. This was much more clarity than I expected to get from Roberts about the closer situation. And yet it's not crystal clear. Mm-hmm. Like I imagine if a murderer's row of lefties is due up at the 8th, Tanner Scott will be coming out rather than preserved for the 9th. And I still imagine, based on the way Roberts has managed his bullpen the past couple of years, that if Scott, with his sloppy control, has a week where he struggles, blows a couple saves, that Roberts won't hesitate to switch to Kirby Yates or someone else for a while. So I don't think I don't think you should treat Tanner Scott as if he's just the closer, but he is the clear front runner on the best team in baseball, and I think at the very least deserves to be drafted ahead of like David Bednar, Jordan Romano, Kenley Jansen, that whole risk group we talked about.
He should be the second Tanner drafted in 2025. Tanner Bybee,
Okay.
then Tanner Scott, then Tanner Houck.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. Spencer Steer.
Tanner rankings.
Spencer Steer could be limited to DH duty at the start of spring training due to shoulder soreness. Apparently, he dealt with this late last season. Still an issue. Don't really love that. Zach Neto said he received good news on his surgically repaired right shoulder and is ahead of schedule in his recovery. Still unclear if he'll be ready for opening day, but good news for you, Scott. I know you were talking up Zach Neto. The Phillies believe Bryson Stott's offense was limited by elbow soreness last season. He never went on the IL, but apparently dealt with this for most of 2024. Tigers' top prospect, Jackson Jobe, has apparently added a curveball and a sinker to his pitch mix during the offseason with the hope of improving his strikeout rate.
Scott, wasn't Job a curveball guy?
Slider. He had a 3,000 RPM
slider.
Yeah.
And I saw some video. I think it's from Chris Clegg, quote tweeted someone else. There was video of Jackson Jobe throwing curveballs recently with over 3,000 RPM spin rate.
Yeah, he's a spin monster. Yeah.
Look,
I moved him up recently.
The entire fantasy community, we all might just be sleeping here on Jobe because his ADP is 267.
I think it's weird. Like, Roki Sasaki is probably a better talent than Jackson Jobe. I think the 200 pick difference or 160 pick difference between them probably overstates the difference in talent, given that we fully expect both to be in the opening day rotation.
Yeah,
that was the end. That was the end.
Yeah.
There was a period.
I'm more likely to draft Jobe at cost than Sasaki, for sure.
Speaking of pitching prospects, Chase Dolander could make the Rockies opening day rotation if he performs well in spring training. He has yet to pitch in AAA. The Rangers have had internal discussions about the possibility of John Gray as their closer. Would make some sense given their current construction at the moment.
Yeah, it's either that or bring in Craig Kimbrell. I don't know.
Yeah. Alex Cora mentioned Garrett Whitlock as a closer candidate, along with Liam Hendricks and Aroldis Chapman. Their chief baseball officer, Craig Breslow, also said he's open to using a closer by committee. So not what we love to hear for the Red Sox. Spencer Horwitz had surgery to repair the extensor tendon in his right thumb and will miss 6 to 8 weeks. Rhett Lauder's throwing program is being limited due to right elbow soreness. Alex Cobb is dealing with right hip inflammation and will be set back about a month. Bruce Bochy said it's possible Cody Bradford could open the season in the bullpen.
Ooh, don't like that.
That might depend on how he looks in spring, how Kumar Rocker and Jack Leiter both look in spring as well.
You know what? Let's get those 5 RP appearances 2 weeks into the season and then get him back in the rotation. I would love to have
Run it back,
Spark
baby.
Bradford 2 years in a row on the Scott White Dynasty League team.
Kyle Harrison said he's rediscovered velocity this spring after fixing issues with his delivery. He is in a camp battle with Hayden Birdsong for the Giants SP5 spot. No surprise, but Anthony Rendon is scheduled to undergo hip surgery and is facing a lengthy absence. His career might be over. The team also signed Yoan Moncada this week, who I presume will now start at third base for the team. The Padres signed both Jason Hayward and my man, Connor Joe.
Frank Love, Samson, Connor Joe.
Yeah, on a Kokomo Friday, on a Valentine's Day. And they could form a platoon in left field this season. Lastly, the Marlins. We're all wearing Marlins shirts. It's like 50 minutes in. We just brought it up now. Marlins shirts. Let's go. The Marlins signed Cal Quantrill to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Don't really think it matters.
Red Marlin shirt
Yep.
for Valentine's Day, to be clear.
To be clear, I was not wearing a Marlins shirt, but then I saw that you two both showed up with Marlins shirts, and I had to pull. You can tell if you're watching. I've worn mine a few more times than these guys have. This is
the first time for me. Hasn't even been washed.
This is a well-loved Miami Sugar Kings shirt.
This is a Sandy Alcantara jersey, by the way. So
Love that.
go Sandy opening day. All right, pitchers we love. We have like 10 minutes left. Chris, I assume you don't want to follow Scott again. Scott, do you have another crazy poem thing?
Of course.
All right. So yeah, Chris, you
All
can
right, we'll get the
Pitch
opening act out of the way. Everybody can stand there with their arms folded, waiting for the show that they really came for. The pitcher I love, I'm going to steal Frank's old fling, Bryan Woo, who I didn't love for most of last season because he kept leaving every start after 5 innings with a hamstring injury or forearm tightness or some kind of issue. He wasn't really a real starting pitcher for like the first half of the season. And then something weird happened on August 1st. He just immediately started throwing 90 pitches per start and started going consistently deep into games. It was at least 6 innings in 9 of his final 11 starts, I believe, if I'm my dad. No, 8 of his final 11 starts, he was getting strikeouts. The thing about Bryan Woo is he's got maybe the best pair of fastballs in baseball. That is not an exaggeration. Bryan Woo has all of the physical characteristics you're looking for from a four-seamer. He gets low on the mound. He's got a good release angle. It gets a 27% whiff rate, but it also generates a ton of pop flies. The average launch angle against is 27 degrees. That is incredibly high. That's going to lead to some home run issues, but more weak contact, low batting average, stuff like that. And then on the other hand, he's got the sinker that has a 0 degree average launch angle. It's really hard to have both an elite four-seamer and an elite sinker. And Bryan Woo has that. It gives him a phenomenal foundation on which to build. He gets weak contact with both of those pitches. He gets weak contact with the slider. The sweeper looked like a really good swing and miss and contact pitch last year. I think Bryan Woo has the full arsenal to be every bit as good as Logan Gilbert and George Kirby. It's just that there are questions about his ability to stay on the mound and throw 180 innings, something that Gilbert and Kirby both have done. I share those concerns, but he's, 80 picks, 90 picks after both of them in ADP. His ADP is 138.4. I think that's a point in the draft where I'm willing to take that chance on a guy who, if he manages to stay healthy, I fully expect to be a must-start pitcher. And, he's in the same range as Carlos Rodon, who I also like. I thought about doing him for this one, but that feels like the right balance of risk and reward for those two guys in particular. I like both of their prices.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to how you feel about that exact thing. Is the price here, 138.3, is that enough given the risk? For me, it's not. I actually wrote up Bryan Woo as a bust this year just because it feels like a ticking time bomb. I feel like at some point, something bad is going to happen with his arm. He went on the IL in August of 23 with right forearm inflammation. He did right elbow inflammation in March of last season. He left early in May with arm tightness. He was scratched from a start in mid-June. Then he was kind of babied after that. So look, once he returned, you pointed out, Chris, like the numbers were great. I think he's a talented pitcher, but I just really worry that something happens here at some point. And so I'm staying away.
Totally fair.
Yeah. Scott, anything on Bryan Woo?
Just that I really wanted to take him for this exercise because his name fits so perfectly, but I don't actually love Bryan Woo. So I didn't pick him. I left him for Chris. And instead, I chose a real strapping fellow, a tall man with a short name that might look good on a driver's license. A man who puts my heart through the kinds of hoops you'd expect to see in Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, Ober. Some will sell him short due to his 3.98 ERA, but I look beyond ERA, deep into the soul, and see not one man, but three. I see a league-high fly ball rate and a home run rate that's better than Shota Imanaga. I see a strike percentage that surpasses Bryce Miller. Hit prevention, walk prevention. These are valuable traits surpassing those of some of the game's best. And yet the strikeout rate is all Ober, better than both. If Imanaga and Miller could have an ERA below 3 as they did, why couldn't Ober? If you remove just 2 starts from his game log, including opening day, early jitters, we'll get past those, his ERA drops to 3.18. You may say that's too convenient, but I'll always make excuses for my man. That's how I felt at first anyway. But we've entered a new ERA era for ERA earned run average, one where everyone knows to look beyond it. And so I find the drafting public looking upon Ober with the same lechery I am. And who am I to compete, really? I'm aware of my flaws. I know my reach. And that's when my wandering eye kicks in and stops on a 33-year-old who's always the bridesmaid, never the bride. No, Sean Manaea didn't do himself any favors by committing the cardinal sin of chopping off his gorgeous hair, but he's won me over with his story. A man who already made his millions, who could have just coasted to the finish line, had a bit of a wandering eye himself last July. He saw some other girl who was better. He could have just burned with envy, but instead he decided to get game. Chris Sale's game. It's all in the angles. And Manaea knows now to reach low with every throw. And the results were pure bliss. A 3.09 ERA, 0.85 whip, 9.9 K per nine over his final 12 starts. His swinging strike rate went from 11% before the change to 14% after the change. They say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And I can say sincerely that I'm flattered by his imitation. And if I have my way, Manaea will be Mamaea, preferably as a 5th or 6th starter. But at the same time, so much more.
It's very good.
Fantastic. Once again, Scott crushing it with the pitchers he loves this season. Bailey Ober, and then the wandering eye for one, Sean Manaea. Bailey Ober, by the way, the ADP right now is 86.3. And Chris, I know you like to do the generic versus name brand article every year. I can clearly see a world where Bailey Ober and George Kirby are really not that far off.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, interestingly, there are kind of a few options for the generic version of George Kirby. And George Kirby himself.
Bryce Miller is another one, too.
Well, I mean.
Dude. I keep making the Imanaga and Bryce Miller and, I keep comparing Ober to them. But you're right. George Kirby is kind of that same profile as well. Elite control, fly ball tendencies that keep the hits down, but also introduce some ERA risk. And average to above average strikeout rate. And I would say of the four, and I mentioned this in my little spiel, I think Ober has the most strikeout ability of the four.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 27% rate last year. I think the problem with Bailey Ober, and you see this in, like I was looking at, Saris's rankings, he's got Bailey Ober buried. He's like 50th or something. He rates very poorly by the various stuff metrics, but I think the thing that both him and Shota Imanaga have going for them is they are physically just outliers. Ober, because he's 6'9", and there just aren't a lot of guys who are that big. And Imanaga, because he's on the opposite end of the spectrum. He's 5'10" lefty. They're just, hitters are worse against pitchers and pitcher types that they don't see as much. That's one of the things we're learning from a lot of this, like at Arsenal and stuff metrics research that's going on. And so you can look at it both ways, because you can say they will continue to be unique and they will continue to befuddle pitch hitters more than their stuff would make you think. You can also, and I kind of lean this way with Imanaga, the more hitters see them, the more tape is out there, the more they're able to, I don't know what that batting cage technology is that they have now where they can simulate a pitcher's exact release point and spin rate and all that stuff.
I think it's a traject machine.
Yeah. You could make the argument that hitters are going to be more comfortable with these guys, but I don't know. I think Ober makes sense as a target this year just because there are other similar types of pitchers who had more success last year and had really just lower ERAs, like Imanaga, who's going ahead of him, like Kirby, who's going ahead of him. I personally think I prefer his teammate, who everybody hated this time last year, Joe Ryan.
Yeah.
I think he's just a slightly better version of that. I think the stuff especially is better for him, but they have similar approaches. But I think Ober's fine at his price. Yeah.
And Joe Ryan's going 25 picks later than Ober right now. Would you guys rather have Ober or Logan Webb this season?
Webb.
Would you rather have Ober or Max Fried?
Oh,
Fried.
for sure.
Yeah.
What about
I think
Ober?
Fried's just way undervalued.
Yeah, this is why I had to have the wandering eye, because I realized everybody was kind of on the same level with me.
Yeah.
With Ober.
Yeah. Ober or Luis Castillo?
Castillo. He
And
didn't get traded.
And Ober or Bryce Miller?
I have Bryce Miller just ahead. It's
Yeah,
very close.
I have Bryce Miller ahead too, but I think the profile is very similar, as I said.
All right. Well, let's quickly just talk about the price tag for Sean Manaea. His ADP is 172.8. So the market is not really buying what happened towards the end of last season. So if you do believe that, this change in arm slot and trying to replicate Chris Sale is not even completely real, because I don't think he'll do exactly that again. But even if it's partially real and he takes some of that into this season, like a mid-threes ERA and like a strikeout per inning.
Oh, it's real and it's spectacular, Frank. I like a good story. I like when a player can describe what he changed, and the change is this stark and it's this visible, and the change in results is this immediate. So you can really connect the dots easily and see how it can continue. And I think Manaea in the entire player pool is the clearest example of that. He basically became a different pitcher. He was already an okay one, a pretty good one, a guy making millions, but he in season just totally changed his delivery to the point that I don't even know that we can compare him to the old Sean Manaea. And while I do think it's true that he won't have the element of surprise anymore, they'll have tape and they'll be able to get a better look at his pitches leading into his starts. And so maybe he won't have quite as much success. I think the game right now favors a low release point that he now has, and he's clearly learned how to do it. It's not like it's a struggle for him. It clicked for him right away. Yeah, so I'm into it. I think people are overlooking him just because he's 33 and he's been around for a while, and they're just kind of sizing up the numbers without really considering the backstory. Because I'd be super skeptical if it was just a numbers thing, but no, I'm buying it, and certainly at the price.
I have heard "Trust Me, Baby, I've Changed" from Sean Manaea before. That's what I'll say. I'm not that guy anymore.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like we should have saved Scott for last so we could have the best for last. I don't really know that. I don't have some great,
I think we saved the best pitcher for last, arguably.
It might be. Look, every year it feels like there's one breakout pitcher that a lot of the fantasy community is in on. And this year, I think that is Spencer Schwellenbach, the pitcher that I love. I have to thank you guys both for leaving him for me. I do appreciate
Yeah, too much competition. I couldn't take it. I love him too, but I love him from afar.
Yeah, look, he burst onto the scene last year, 3.35 ERA, 104 whip. All the underlying ERA estimators were under 3.5. Good strikeouts, over a strikeout per inning. Great control, under 2 walks per 9. His 20.8% K- walk rate ranked 16th among pitchers with 120 innings. 13.5% swinging strike rate, ranked 12th. He's got 6 different pitches, 2 of which have a whiff rate over 40%. The curveball, the splitter. The one thing that does scare me is this big innings jump, which we talked about for a few other pitchers going earlier on, but from 65 to 168 2/3, that is a big jump, and I will acknowledge it. It kind of scares me. And the price tag, it's kind of like Lawrence Butler. It's like a little bit higher than I would like it to be, but I just think the breakout case is just so obvious. So around 95th overall, SP 26. Basically every draft, I am gunning for Schwellenbach as my SP3 whenever I can get him around that 100 range.
I'm a little concerned that there's going to be just kind of a pushback. No, that's not the best word for it, but basically just like it was a little too much too fast. And
Zach Gallen 2024. right?
Yeah. I mean, he seems like a pitching prodigy, Schwellenbach, because he was a two-way player in college. And this was his second professional season, and he was throwing 6 pitches with elite control like he had been pitching for 15 years.
He was a reliever in college, too. He was just closing at Nebraska.
So that's why you're like, there's reasons to be excited about him are obvious. But it seems like in drafts, there's no accounting for any kind of slippage there. And I don't know. I find the prices just a little too high for me.
He is a breakout candidate. I will probably not draft this year.
Yeah.
I totally get that on the cost there. If you want to stay away as a result, I think some of the downside is baked in, because if he kind of just does what he did last year and picks up where he left off and does that over 180 innings, then he's probably close to an SP1, like a high-end SP2, low-end SP1. So I think that could be the upside, and maybe the downside is he takes a little bit of a step back, and we kind of settle in the middle, SP26 and ADP, which a tad high, but I'm still willing to do it. It's my draft plan is almost based around getting Schwellenbach as my SP3. So yeah, I'm absolutely in love with Spencer Schwellenbach this season. We are going to wrap there. For Scott and Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye.